Woo! It's the boy, Bubba, Lutz coming through. Hella clutch, flawless, can't be touched. It's your boy, Bubba, Lutz. Yeah, I need that hot take. I need the truth and everything that is not fake. So tell me who's
Welcome back, Bubba Bunch, to another edition of the Bubba Let's Sports Podcast. This is episode 189. This is the preview for the Minnesota Vikings versus Dallas Cowboys game, and also a preview of some of the other games around the NFL in Week 11. So let's just have a casual conversation, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching this right now, you're saying, Bubba, that's the second time this week you're rocking PSG, or is that your team? You know what, man? They're just stylish, And this kit right here, this is just a clean kit. Oh my God, I'm sorry. If as long as my mom's not watching this, and as long as my family's not watching this, I just want to let you all know that I spent about $500 on PSG gear this week, and it was only three things. This was $100. There was a jacket that I wanted that was $250. Okay, but anyways, let's get back to the subject at hand. Let's start off with the Minnesota Vikings versus the Dallas Cowboys, and let's start off with the injury report. And I'd say that the Minnesota Vikings, who have been dealing with a lot of injuries, Danielle Hunter, to their linebacker position as well, who we got. There was a big name, Anthony Barr, earlier in the season, went on IR. Eric Kendricks gets banged up in last week's game. A lot of departures in their secondary, Xavier Rhodes and Andrew Sendejo. So it's really up to Harrison Smith to really get that young group of guys going. But, I feel like this week their biggest concern is going to be on their offensive line. And offensively, that's where a lot of the questionable or injuries that are going to be out for this game occur. Ezra Cleveland, which is their right guard, who has been really good. I think that was a tremendous steal in the draft, considering they needed help up front. But out of Boise State, I really liked his film. I really liked him around that second to third round. That's where he went. He went in the second day of the draft. I think that was a good pickup by the Minnesota Vikings. He's played well this year. So with an ankle injury, he's going to be out in this football game. That is a huge loss. So it's really up to Brett Jones, who is in his sixth year in the NFL. He can play center. He can play guard. They have him on the depth chart pretty all over the place. But Brett Jones, who is a veteran, he'll be in this game taking over for Ezra. Let's see how that works out, especially on the inside line, due to the fact that, the Cowboys with Neville Gallimore, Tyron Crawford, Antoine Woods have been playing better ever since the departure of Dante Pell and Everson Griffin, excuse me. So we'll see how that matchup really comes together on Sunday, but I think Cleveland being out is going to be something to look at later in the week. And then CJ Ham, fullback for the Vikings, who has been a great addition to this offense, and using Dalvin Cook alongside CJ Ham in the backfield, sending them on just basic routes, out routes, flat routes. I think that Monday night game last week against the Chicago Bears really put together what CJ Ham brings to the table in this offense. And Kirk Cousins likes to go to this guy, bulky guy, strong but agile, to this offense. He is on reserve/COVID-19 list. So there's not really game status yet for CJ Ham, but it's not looking good for him on Sunday afternoon. We have some injuries on the defensive side, but nothing really to look into. Only other guy that is questionable that is really going to be a factor in this game is going to be Cameron Dantzler in the secondary as a cornerback. He is questionable with concussion, but like I said, young group of guys in that secondary. So they've been dealing with a lot of adversity this season. So nothing to really look into for Sunday's game against the Cowboys. Let's look at the Cowboys injury report as well. Tyler Biadasz going to be out again in this game with a hamstring injury that occurred, last week or 2 weeks ago, right before kickoff, and then Joe Looney has to come in. I think Joe Looney's going to be fine. I've always been a fan of Joe Looney, so I don't think that this should be something to really worry about, especially with the other issues on this offensive line. What's really nice is that Brandon Knight is going to come off of IR very soon after that torn meniscus. He had very small, minor knee surgery to repair that. It took about 3 to 4 weeks to really get him back into the flow of things. I think by next week he will be back in this lineup, and I feel like you should put Cameron Irving on the left tackle, and then you put Brandon Knight at right tackle to replace Terrence Steele, because dear God, can we stop with the Terrence Steele as a starter in Dallas? Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones, I don't know what the hell you guys are thinking, but maybe we should just slap some sense into you. Let's get Mark Colombo. I'm sorry. You know what? It was a rumor. Allegedly, he punched Joe Judge and got fired. But let's just slap Mike McCarthy and Jerry Jones a little bit for thinking that Terrence Steele is still a starter in the NFL. But that's for another day. He's going to be out in this game, Tyler Biadasz. So we'll look into that. Zach Martin's full participant in practice since Thursday with a calf injury. Looks to be good to go. You also got the returning Andy Dalton. No more Garrett Gilbert. No more Ben DiNucci. It's Andy Dalton, the ginger gunslinger himself, coming back. And I don't know. I'm just kind of about it, Like, he's still suffering from some symptoms of COVID. He's not going to be that contagious, though. So he's still trying to get back into the swing of things after being put on that COVID list. I just don't know. I just expect more of the same for the Cowboys in this game. I'm not excited to see Andy Dalton back after the concussion, after COVID, and then all the talk about Ezekiel Elliott, who was on the injury report earlier in this week. Hamstring injury. He was questionable very early on, but I think he's going to be fine. But all this talk about him having an off year, I heard some reporters and analysts that have been covering the Cowboys for a very long time. He's saying how he is so relied on his offensive line. And I'm saying you can't really blame his off year. And off year is a really far-fetched thing because he is still top 5 in the league in rushing yards. And I don't think he's having the worst year of his career. I'm just saying that, it just doesn't make sense to me how Tony Pollard has that same offensive line and he is pushing more for those extra yards and pushing more to get more snaps on this offense. And I feel like he is my favorite player coming out of this year. There's a lot of great guys on that defense that have really stepped up. Aldon Smith, Randy Gregory, and, of course, Trevon Diggs. But offensively, not just CeeDee Lamb, but I feel like Tony Pollard has been a really positive thing coming out of this entire Cowboys team, and I feel like he should get more snaps. He should get more of the load because I'm starting to lose faith in Ezekiel Elliott. I'm sorry, but I was talking to a Giants fan at work a few days ago, and I told him, I was like, I love Tony Pollard. I think Zeke's having a part of his career where he's just losing it. And he's like, dude, I love Tony Pollard. I really think he is a really good running back, so I agree with you. And so I just feel like I'm not the only one that's just seeing this. I feel like not enough people are just talking about how important Tony Pollard can be to this offense. But anyways, we also have Joe Thomas, who was a full participant after a wrist injury. And then we have some of the big boys on that defensive line, especially in the defensive ends. Randy Gregory, both starting defensive ends. Randy Gregory with the illness. We don't really know what kind of illness it is. He's questionable for this game. And so is DeMarcus Lawrence with the illness as well. We don't know if this is COVID or not. But to have your 2 starting defensive ends, it's really going to be interesting to see, especially when we look at the depth chart and we look at the roster for the Dallas Cowboys. So you have DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory that are going to be questionable for this game. So it leaves you with Tyron Crawford, you can put at the defensive end, Bradley Anae, who hasn't gotten a lot of snaps, but I do want to see more of him. They just picked up Rondell Carter in the waivers, so he's just had a few weeks to really get adjusted to the system. I don't know how many snaps and how much they want to put onto him in this game against the Vikings. And they also picked up Eli Onku from the Houston Texans, who is a veteran defensive tackle. So I don't know if you move him out to the defensive end. You also have Justin Hamilton, who's had moments of good film, but overall not a good solution, especially as a starting defensive end. So if you're the Cowboys, man, the Minnesota Vikings are dependent on Dalvin Cook and that offensive line. If they can get the running game going very early, which they proved in many of their wins this season, it is going to be a long day for this front seven in Dallas. And with these injuries, to the big injuries that they're dealing with right now, I mean, it's a very young group that still needs some time to grow. Neville Gallimore, Eli Onku, Rondell Carter, Bradley Anae. And then when we look at some of the other issues defensively as we move on, because other than that, the injury report is fine, I'm more worried about how this secondary is going to hold up. They just put Trevon Diggs on IR. He's probably out for the rest of the season with the foot injury. And he's out for like 4 to 6 weeks. It's might as well be over for Trevon Diggs this season. They just got Chidobe Awuzie back from IR. So right now, your starting cornerbacks are Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown, Chidobe Awuzie. You also have C.J. Goodwin. And the everlasting issues in that safety position, whether you want to go with Darian Thompson, Xavier Woods, Donovan Wilson, Steven Parker, who they've integrated a lot more. We haven't seen anything about Reggie Robinson. I want to see what he brings to the table. But when you have to go against one of the most dynamic duos at the wide receiver position with Justin Jefferson, who is a Rookie of the Year candidate, and you can never forget about Adam Thielen. You have Kyle Rudolph as well, who is a threat in the red zone. I don't know. I really don't know. It's just a bad matchup for this defense that has had some good success over the last few weeks, and they're coming off that bye. So they have some more time to get adjusted with the Mike Nolan defense. But I'm saying, man, look. So in the middle, we have seen improvement with the defensive line, Antoine Woods, Tyron Crawford, Neville Gallimore. You start to see more excitement for Neville Gallimore for the way he played a couple weeks ago. And I'm really excited about Neville Gallimore. I want to see him prosper in this defense. And he's going to, like I said, I think he's going to be a great fan favorite over the next few years in Dallas. And ever since Dontari Poe, Everson Griffin leave Dallas, you have seen a huge, dramatic improvement in the rushing defense and the passing defense as far as rushing the quarterback and stopping the run in Dallas. But this is a huge test for these guys up front. So, number one, you need to make Kirk Cousins win this football game. And I know that's not easy because Kirk Cousins has his moments of making that $84 million guaranteed contract look good, but then there's the moments where he goes 1-9 on Monday Night Football, and you're saying he's not clutch. Well, when you look at the offense this year, and we see them winning football games against really good competition like the Green Bay Packers. They got that win a few weeks ago. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They're hot. They're trying to get back in the wild card position and getting to 500 and continuously winning these divisional games. This is a bad scenario for the Dallas Cowboys. You have a hot team coming into Minnesota with a high-octane offense that can explode at any moment. And when we look at the entire season for the Cowboys, and we even look at the last few years, they have struggled to stop the run. And they've done better, but how good can they be? And how can we figure that out? Well, how about you go against the rushing leader that is Dalvin Cook, and a man that is so explosive, that is so dynamic. I just don't like how this game is panning out for the Cowboys because Dalvin Cook's going to run all over this defensive line. Whether they go to the outside where they're going to have a lot of injuries with Lawrence and Randy Gregory, so Aldon Smith and all those guys are going to have to take a lot of the responsibility. And I don't know if they're ready for that. I don't think they have the athleticism to get to Dalvin Cook on time. And then on the inside, well, that's where Dalvin Cook loves to find the holes and to get to the second wave of the defense. And he's found much success doing that this season. So if you want to prove that you are an improved defense, and if you want to say, hey, we're not just going to be slept on this entire season, even with the injuries and even with one of our best players out in Trevon Diggs and some of our best players up front being questionable for this game, we're not going to let up. Just a few weeks ago, they put up a good fight against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel like the Steelers underestimated the Cowboys, so I don't know if that's much to look into. But over the last few years, when the Cowboys face the Minnesota Vikings, it's always an ugly game. It's always a very scrappy, very hard-nosed, tough football game that doesn't lead to a lot of points. And I feel like maybe that can be the case on Sunday. But I don't know, man. It's going to be very difficult to do that when you have Dalvin Cook to worry about. And if you're going to rely heavily on the rushing defense, well, you're going to leave Justin Jefferson one-on-one with Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, or Chidobe Awuzie. And I don't feel comfortable with that because those guys are undersized. Justin Jefferson's, 6'3", 6'4". He's so agile. He can break off a tackle at any point. And he just is so smart at finding the holes in this defense. And you're talking about a defense that does run a lot of zone coverage, and they're going to need to do that in this game. I think if you're Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, I think that you let Kirk Cousins rip that ball. You go very aggressive very quickly. You run off the play action because they're going to be focused on Dalvin Cook so much that if you can run that play action very well early in this football game with Kirk Cousins and he gets comfortable quickly in this football game, then I think it's going to be a long day for this Dallas Cowboys defense. And like I said, I wasn't that impressed with the Steelers game because I felt like it was more of the Steelers' lack of effort and underestimating the Cowboys. But I'm also looking at this offense and I'm saying, look, the offensive line issues are not going away. And you still have a really bad left side with Cameron Irving and Connor Williams, and you still got Terrence Steele that is a joke, really, as a right tackle. And we look at this Vikings defense that has had a lot of departures, that does have a lot of injuries, and yet that underrated defensive line is scrappy. They're physical, and they proved it on Monday night against the Chicago Bears that there's not names, there's not star-studded guys on this defensive line, but they make it work. They have that young secondary that works as well, and they're led by really good veterans in Harrison Smith and Kyle Hendricks. They are still a Mike Zimmer defense that can bring a lot to the table. And they have stopped some of the best offenses in the league to 20, 25 points. They stopped Green Bay to 22. And then they've been on that high of 3-game winning streaks. And it has a lot to do with their defense. So, look, man, I just don't know how this cannot work out in the favor of the Minnesota Vikings. They're hot. They're good to go. They want to make that playoff push. And I feel like the issues for the Cowboys are just going to be too much. I'm not high on Andy Dalton being the return quarterback. I don't even care if Garrett Gilbert was in this football game. I do feel like this is a bad matchup for the Dallas Cowboys because it's always a rough game to watch against the Minnesota Vikings over the last few years. And it's just a bad scenario for the Cowboys. Now, having that extra week to prepare on the bye week is nice because Mike Nolan has seen progression in this defense. But really, man, I just don't know. I don't feel confident in this Cowboys team. I'm more excited to see what these new guys bring in, Anku and Rondell Carter, especially because with the injuries going on, they might see more snaps on Sunday. But I don't know. I'm not excited. I'm definitely not excited for this football game. It's felt so nice to be on a bye week and not have to feel and watch the pain that is the Dallas Cowboys. But I do think that the Minnesota Vikings will win this football game. I'd say they score 21, 24 points. They stop the Cowboys to maybe 13, 14 points. I don't think it's going to be a fun game to watch. It's not the most exciting matchup to watch this week in the NFL. So really, I think the Minnesota Vikings win this game handedly. It is going to be rough to watch from the very beginning, but I don't know. I feel like the weapons on the offense for the Minnesota Vikings are just going to be too much, and the matchups just are not in the favor of the Cowboys. I keep going back to that, but the matchup just doesn't look right with me on paper. I think Justin Jefferson's going to have a good day, a really good day against this defense, and yeah, I think Dalvin Cook's going to go for 150 yards. I really do think so. If the Cowboys can stop Dalvin Cook to around 100 yards or less, I think that is the most impressive thing to come out of this football game. I don't think there's any way the Cowboys win this football game. Absolutely not. But if you make the case that we lost because of Kirk Cousins, not Dalvin Cook, I'll be like, oh, okay. So then you did have a good game plan. You executed that game plan. And you only held Dalvin Cook to not 3 or 4 touchdowns, which is highly likely in this football game. So if Dalvin Cook doesn't have a 40-point fantasy day, I think that's a moral victory for the Dallas Cowboys going forward. And I only see them winning maybe one football game the rest of the year, and it's not this one. So now let's look at some other matchups around the league that are going to happen in Week 11 of the NFL. Let's start off with some of the early games. Just announced today, Jameis Winston not going to eat some W's this weekend. It's going to be the Taysom Hill show in New Orleans this weekend as they take on the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is going to be an interesting game to watch because you can look at it from both sides, is that Taysom Hill has no starting quarterback experience, and Jameis Winston, after the laser eye surgery, he still led the league in touchdowns. He also led the league in interceptions last week. And this is kind of the scenario that we saw the Saints go into last season after the Rams game, midway through the season. Drew Brees goes down with a thumb injury. He's out for a few weeks. Teddy Bridgewater comes in, leads them to an undefeated record. Drew Brees comes back to make the playoffs. They unfortunately get kicked out pretty early. But having to deal with Drew Brees' injuries, bringing another quarterback that just has to do the simple things, doesn't need to do anything really extreme because they have Alvin Kamara. But this time around, Kamara is questionable for this game. And I know he was dealing with a lot of injuries last year, but he is questionable for this game. Don't know yet if he'll play this Sunday. And talking about how Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith, Emmanuel Sanders have been playing as of late, I don't know, man. This is the time to see whether or not the Saints team is legit, if they have that same fire and that same discipline as they did last year, where they went 6-0 with Teddy Bridgewater. Well, now you do it with Taysom Hill, and Drew Brees is going to be out for a pretty good amount of time with the rib injuries, the collapsed lung. It's interesting that they did go with Taysom Hill immediately, and they're not going to put Jameis Winston in any of the offensive packages this weekend. So, I mean, if we're going to make the case that Taysom Hill should be a starting quarterback either in New Orleans in the future or somewhere else, I mean, this is his time to do it. We've seen him time and time again use the wildcat, use a lot of the run scheme in this offense. You don't really see him pass a lot, and when he does, it's maybe once in a blue moon. But now he's going to have to use his arm. If they try to just limit to what they always do with Taysom Hill, even the Falcons defensively can stop them, I think. But you look at it glass half full, and you're saying, well, Taysom Hill, if you're going to give him that start, if you're going to give him that time to really develop as a starting quarterback, might as well start off with one of the worst defenses in the league in the Falcons, who give up a lot of yards, who give up a lot of points, and they're 3-6. So really, what do they have to prove this time around when you already lead the division and you're going to probably win the division after those 2 wins against the Bucs? And the Falcons are just there, And the Saints defense has been playing well as of late. And this will be a good test against a good offense with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley is questionable in this game, but I think there's a good chance that he starts this week, and I need him in fantasy, dear God. So I'm really intrigued by this divisional matchup, not because of the implications of what it does in the division. It's just going forward. Are we going to see the same old Falcons team defensively and really disappoint, lose close games, lose leads? Or are we going to see a Saints team really have to overcome a lot of adversity? And if Taysom Hill works out, well, great. If he doesn't, well, then we're going to eat some W's with Jameis Winston. Dear God, help us. Another early game that I'm really excited for is a high-scoring affair that I expect out of the Panthers and Lions. Now, DeAndre Swift is going to be out for the Lions, so expect a lot of Adrian Peterson. I believe Kenny Golladay is going to be out for this game as well, but the way that Marvin Jones played last week, dear God, man, that man is a very underrated wide receiver. And then you look at the Panthers, who Teddy Bridgewater is a game-time decision. But if I'm the Carolina Panthers, look, I'm just saying, man, I'm a big fan of P.J. Walker. The XFL MVP that should have been if the season wasn't suspended and the XFL went under before the whatever. But P.J. Walker, man, is a very intriguing quarterback to watch because he balled out in the XFL. And he did have some opportunity to get some playing time on that Thursday night game. I forget against who, but he didn't look good, but I think it was just because of just not a lot of preparation and not a lot of time to get first reps or first team reps with the Panthers. So now that Teddy Bridgewater has been dealing with that knee injury and P.J. Walker has some time to develop with the first team, maybe it's not such a bad thing to put in P.J. Walker and let Teddy sit for at least another week because Panthers are 3-7. I think they're a competitive football team, and I think that 3-7 doesn't really show how good they can be in the future. I think Matt Rule, Joe Brady have done a phenomenal job in their first year, even with all the young players they have defensively. They have a really good offense with a lot of wide receiver weapons on the outside, and even without Christian McCaffrey, I think they'd be fine to win a few football games. It's tough to see McCaffrey go down again, and he'll be out for a couple weeks, but I think they'll be fine offensively. And I don't mind seeing P.J. Walker in an audition to be a starting quarterback either in Carolina or somewhere else. I'm a big fan of P.J. Walker. So him against the Detroit Lions defense that is on and off with Matt Patricia. I don't know. I think this game can be fun to watch if you're just wanting to watch a lot of points being scored, so keep an eye on that one. There's another game that I'm kind of into, but this is obviously the most intriguing matchup of the weekend in my eyes, or maybe the second. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm kind of just freeballing it here, but as far as the early games, Titans visiting the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens coming off that loss on Sunday night against the New England Patriots. The Titans losing on Thursday night and looking very disappointing against the Colts. That was a bad week for both of these football teams. You got the Titans that are 1-3 in their last 4 games. Their only win was against the Chicago Bears. What did he fucking do? And then the Ravens. I'm looking at 2 football teams here that are both 6-3, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing a contender. For the Titans, their defensive struggles are apparent. And I don't know if it's just the effort. I don't know if it's personnel. But I see a group that can create a lot of turnovers. The last time I checked, they had the highest turnover margin in the NFL, so they can create those. But they give up a lot of points, they give a lot of yards, and it showed on Thursday night against Phillip Rivers and that offense. They made every single one of those guys look like Pro Bowlers. And their special teams caused a lot of issues with some of those plays, but defensively, they just could not get off the field on 3rd down and 4th down. So you got to tighten it up. You got to get off the field. And if you're the Ravens, I'm seeing a football team that struggles against playoff AFC teams. Players and teams that they can see later on in the season, they always come out flat, they always come out stale, and you always see Lamar Jackson frustrated. You always see him not feel comfortable against these really threatening teams in the AFC. And the Titans can be one of those teams. This could be a matchup that we see later on in the season in the playoffs. So I'm very intrigued by this matchup. I'm seeing a set of teams that need to prove something, that they need a dominant victory to show, hey, we're legit, because if I'm the Ravens, I want to throw the ball in this game. I know that when it comes down to the playoffs, Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Lamar Jackson are going to have the best rushing offense in the NFL. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about how they can run the ball. I'm worried about if you have an athletic safety linebacker that is speedy but physical, like we saw last week in Kyle Duggar, that we saw last week with who was the other guy? Josh Uche. We see guys that can QB spy Lamar Jackson and very, limit the field to where he has to stay in the pocket and has to throw down the field. This is not the strong suit of Lamar Jackson, but it needs to improve if he wants to be legit and win Super Bowls. I'm watching Kyler Murray be the quarterback that Lamar Jackson should be. I love that you use your legs. I love that you get to the outside and roll out, and you get those extra yards with your feet if there's nothing down the field. But you also have to have that arm down the stretch in those very tough situations to where you have to make those throws. You have to make those clutch throws, and if you don't have the arm for it, then you're just a running quarterback. And Kyler Murray is showing you that balance of, look, I'm going to use my legs. There's no doubt about it, but I can throw this ball. I can rip it. That's what I want to see out of Lamar Jackson. I want to see him continue what he's doing with his feet, but I need improvement in his arm. I need him to utilize Mark Andrews more. I need him to utilize Willie Snead, who is a great wide receiver. And if you're going to bring in Dez Bryant, what's holding us back from seeing him have that comeback? I want to see the X thrown up again, not because of what he did in Dallas. I just want to see him get back and have some success in the NFL with all the injuries that he dealt with after Dallas let him go. So this is a perfect opportunity for Lamar Jackson to take advantage of this defense for the Titans that doesn't have Jadeveon Clowney, that doesn't have Adoree Jackson. Kenny Vaccaro has been on the injury report this week, so he's banged up. I'm seeing a perfect opportunity for the Baltimore Ravens, that offense, to just throw the ball in the air. I want to see that ball thrown a lot more than it is ran. And for the Titans, well, Calais Campbell's going to be doubtful for this game. Let's see if Derrick Henry can continue his strong form this season. But I need more out of A.J. Brown. I need more out of Corey Davis. It was a rough week for Ryan Tannehill. He only had like over 150 yards. That's unacceptable for Ryan Tannehill, who's supposedly an MVP candidate. But these two teams have something to prove, and when you go against each other, you have a lot more to prove. So if this is a close game, I don't think this really shows us much about both of these teams. But if one team can be dominant over the other, if we can get that Titans team from earlier in the season, that was what's the word I'm looking for? Just out-coaches other teams and Mike Vrabel. This is a really good coach matchup in Harbaugh and Vrabel. But this is a potential playoff matchup. So we'll see. But I am so intrigued by that matchup in Baltimore. The last early game that we're looking at is the Houston Texans versus the Patriots. The only reason I'm really looking to this is that I want to see more about Josh Uche. I want to see more Kyle Duggar. And with a dynamic quarterback like Deshaun Watson, who has just been through the ringer as far as issues go in Houston. Deshaun Watson in his last game with the Patriots really played well. So I always like to see what Bill Belichick does with Deshaun Watson. It's always a fun matchup to watch. So keep that in mind for the early game. As we look into the later games, there's only one in that afternoon slot that really catches my attention, and as the Green Bay Packers going to Indianapolis to face the Colts. Colts are 6-3, Packers are 7-2. Again, these are two teams that continue proving that they are playoff contenders. And look, like I've said before, I am really solid on the Packers being a Super Bowl contender. I think no matter what, if you have Aaron Rodgers, if you have Aaron Jones, you are going to be fine. They're going to get Allen Lazard back. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is playing phenomenal. Devontae Adams leads the league in touchdown receptions. And that defense is always, up in the air of what they can do. But they have a really good pass rush, and their secondary can be great when they're fully healthy. But then you look at Indianapolis. I love their defense. They are physical. They are tough. They will beat you down. And they proved that against the Tennessee Titans. Their defense is going to get them far into the playoffs. But what's holding them back from me saying I am all in with this Indianapolis Colts team is Phillip Rivers. And I'm surprised that the Colts are the favorite in this game, -1.5. That's a very tight favorite and very small favorite for the Colts. But I am surprised that I think the Packers are the better team. I think the Packers have a better offense. And it'll be nice to see what the Colts defense, who is number 1 in the league at total yards allowed in the NFL per game. And then you have the Packers, who are top 5 in almost every category offensively. I'm really excited about this one. But I do think the Packers win this game. I don't know. I think the Colts will have a good showing, and they played very well on Thursday against the Titans. I'm not sold on them. I'm sorry, but everything that is holding me back for the Colts is Phillip Rivers. Because if he throws interceptions, if he just gives Aaron Rodgers more opportunities to score, it's going to be a bad day for the Colts. And at 6-3, I mean, that's nice. And you have the win over the Tennessee Titans, so you're up there in the division of the AFC South. But, man, I just can't go away from Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. I just can't. I love the guy. He just gives no fucks now. I love the Packers. It's interesting what this matchup can bring. I just think the Packers should be the favorite in this game. The last game, and this is the most exciting game for me this weekend because how it went last time earlier in the season. It's the Kansas City Chiefs and the Oakland Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday Night Football. You know we love Sunday Night Football. I mean, he's brought some great games this season. And with the Raiders being the Chiefs earlier in the season, they're right on their tail in the AFC West. This is a good time for the Kansas City Chiefs to get back a loss from earlier in the season. But if the Raiders can beat the Chiefs twice in one season, I'm going to be all in on the Las Vegas Raiders and John Gruden. I mean, man, I don't know. I want to see how Coach Reed takes an approach at this football game. Because we've seen some games where he utilizes that running game with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and now Le'Veon Bell. He controls the time of possession. He doesn't go for the explosive and the most unique plays in the world and gets quick scores immediately. We see games where he's utilizing the clock and he uses those running backs to balance it out. He's not throwing more than he runs. It's sometimes where it's just 50-50. And those are the most impressive games that I've seen out of the Chiefs in the last year and a half, is when they just slow it down and they control the clock to where they limit the amount of possessions by that opposing team. And I feel like you have to do it this time around. Look, the Raiders are going to have that same approach. They're going to try to limit Patrick Mahomes being off the field as much as possible in this game. And the way that they do that, it was Josh Jacobs, the most physical and the most dominating, in my eyes, hello? Sorry, I had to take that. But anyways, back to what I was saying about Josh Jacobs, how he is just one of the most dominant running backs in the league as far as just slowing you down, breaking you down, and at the very end, he just nails the head or hits the nail on the coffin, and he hits you with that dagger. He is having a very great year. He's found the end zone 8 times through rushing. But I think that if you're John Gruden, you have to take that approach of limiting Patrick Mahomes on the field. You run it with Josh Jacobs. You use Darren Waller a lot. And if you need to take those shots, if this becomes a high-scoring affair and you need to win in a shootout, you have Henry Ruggs, you have Hunter Renfrow that have proven time and time again that they can make the big plays down the field. Now, for the Chiefs, I'm contemplating whether they go for the Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell approach, or if they just continue to do what they do and they get back this win, throw everything out of the playbook like they did against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday night. So I mean, on Sunday night, prime time, this is a perfect opportunity for the Las Vegas Raiders to get another win on the Chiefs and prove to the NFL, like, hey, we're not just a team that is going to get better as we go along, and maybe in a few years we can win against the Chiefs and get past the division. No, if they can win this football game, they have a good chance of winning this division. Not only just getting the wild card, and they can meet up with the Chiefs again in the playoffs, but winning this division is a huge statement for the Las Vegas Raiders in their first season at their new place in Las Vegas. So I love this defense. I think they're physical. I think this is exactly what John Gruden wanted out of this defense, with a lot of guys that you just didn't expect to be this good, especially like last week, Jeff Heath getting 2 interceptions. Crazy, right? And you know that I love the acquisition of David Irving. We'll see how he implements himself into this football game. But the Raiders, they can dominate the line with their offensive line, and Josh Jacobs. Derek Carr is always an underrated quarterback for me. And either this can be a defensive struggle or a shootout, and I'm all for both. This is a very, very intriguing matchup coaching-wise with John Gruden and Andy Reid. So may the best man win, but I think no matter what, you just sit back, get some popcorn, and you enjoy the show that is going to be the Sunday night matchup for the Raiders and the Chiefs. And on Monday night, we end off Week 11 with the Buccaneers and the Rams, two teams that I'm not convinced yet. I'm not sold on yet. The Rams, they have a really good defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey and a bunch of young guys around that. Leonard Floyd is playing amazing football right now. So I think Staley has done a phenomenal job in his first year as defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. The Buccaneers, you see the great defensive play by Todd Bowles and this group. And then offensively, we see two teams that have really set up the same kind of offensive scheme. They try to utilize the wide receivers as much as possible, put them in screens, in different routes, different plays, and they have a committee of running backs that they can utilize at any moment. I think the Rams do that better than the Bucs do, but that's not to sleep on the Bucs with Leonard Fournette, with Ronald Jones, and with Shady McCoy. Now with the Rams, they can beat you on so many different levels with their running backs because they have the hard-hitting power of Malcolm Brown. They have Darrell Henderson, who is agile and just a freak of an athlete. And then you have Cam Akers, who is explosive, can do a lot of great things in the passing blocking schemes. And now with Josh Reynolds really coming together as a wide receiver for them, you still have Robert Woods, you still have Cooper Kupp, and you still have Tyler Higbee. I'm seeing two defenses that they can really put together a nice film session if they can figure each other out. And this is kind of one of those games to where I'm like, look, they need to prove something. I'm not high on the Bucs after their disappointing losses to the Saints and them looking flat against the Giants, barely beating them. I'm seeing the Rams that beat everybody in the NFC East, but really, what does that prove? And now we're starting to see them, win some significant football games, especially last week against the Seattle Seahawks, who just beat the Arizona Cardinals. So now that division in the NFC West is even more up in the air as far as who's going to win that division. It just looks like the 49ers are just slightly out of that. So now it's the three teams, Seahawks, Cardinals, and Rams, that are around the same record. And this is huge for the Rams. If they can prove to me that they can beat a Bucs team that is on fire. I'm not saying that if the Bucs come out flat like they did against the Saints, then I'm not saying like, oh, well, you just beat the Bucs they're not a contender. I'm waiting to see more out of Antonio Brown, who's been in the news lately for his incident before he got signed by the Bucs. And I just, for the first time in my life, I'm doubting the abilities of Tom Brady and his offense. Even in those rough years with the Patriots, even like last year, to where they had no offensive weapons and they only had was running backs. Well, now you have everything in the kitchen to work with. You have every ingredient possible to have an explosive offense, and I'm not seeing it yet. So even at 7-3, so what? Like, You are just another Baltimore Ravens. You are just another Rams team. And now they go against each other. So, I don't know. On Monday night, they haven't been that exciting. So, I hope this is not another case of what the Bucs did a few weeks ago against the Giants, where you're like, man, this is really disappointing. If they both come out really well, Bruce Arians versus Sean McVay, I love coaching matchups. But if they come out and play good football on both sides and just the better team won, I think that's good signs for both of these teams. Now, if they both come out flat and you're just like, I'm waiting for more, then we're just back to square one about these teams that I'm just not sold on. So, but Chiefs and Raiders, game of the week, hands down. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Bobolette Sports Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this, so make sure to follow, subscribe. Anything you can do for the podcast that will help me out, please do so. We're still on the road to 100 subscribers toward the end part of the year, and we'll see you next time on the Bobolette Sports Podcast.
Yeah, hold on. Tell me who's your top 5 quarterbacks right now, dead or alive, huh? And how much do you care about a ring if the best player got carried by the team? Now, would you lose if it been a better draft pick? And do you cuss when your team get their ass kicked? Now, do you keep it classy or you keep it ratchet?